Welcome and happy St. George's Day. Today we are going to delve a little bit into who St. George was, and with limited budget, limited talent, and without the aid of a safety net, we will present for you one of the famous legends of St. George. St. George was not actually England's first patron saint. The honour of patron saint of England fell to St. Edmund the Martyr, King of East Anglia in the 9th century, who was executed for refusing to renounce his faith and power share Viking rule. Edmund remained England's patron saint until his influence began to fade during the Third Crusade. It was said that Richard I visited the tomb of St. George in Lydda on the eve of battle, and when victorious the next day, Richard adopted St. George as his personal patron and protector of his army, including his banner of the Red Cross on white. Whilst the banner of Edmund was still carried in battle, the banner of St. George also became more visible, and in 1348, Edward II created a new chivalric order called the Knights of the Garter, and declaring George as the now patron saint of England. St. George is also the patron saint of Georgia, Ethiopia, Iberia, Catalonia, Aragon and Valencia, Portugal and Brazil. He is also celebrated in Russia, Bulgaria, Serbia and Montenegro. He is also the patron saint of various cities, parishes and regions around the world, often appearing on coats of arms, as well as being the patron saint of scouting. But just who was he? Well, it's believed that George was born in Cappadocia in Turkey and most likely died in Lydda, now Israel, in the then Roman province of Palestine in AD 303. It is believed that George joined the Roman army but retained his Christian faith, leading to his execution when he refused to make sacrifices to pagan gods on the orders of the emperor. So where does this dragon come from then? The dragon George fought appears to be mentioned as far back as the 11th century, but the most well-known version of St. George and the Dragon is probably from Richard Johnson's 1596 Seven Champions of Christendom, where George, riding his noble steed Bayard, saves a beautiful African princess from an evil fire-breathing dragon by piercing the dragon's heart with his spear, named Ascalon. As a reward for his slaying of the dragon, George marries Sabra, and one of their children becomes the legendary Guy of Warwick. This story is actually a retelling of a much earlier story from the 13th century called The Golden Legend. Legend has it that in a quiet province, a selfish king resided over his people. His court was rich and he coveted gold and wealth. The only thing he valued more than his wealth was his only daughter. Now, a vile-tempered, poison-spitting dragon had taken up residence in a pool on the outskirts of the city.
Morning.
The dragon would venture through the fields, poisoning the people with his foul breath, making them sick and unable to tend the fields and livestock. So the dragon made good use of this and ate the livestock, horses, cattle, goats and sheep. But he began to run out of food, and so the people turned to the king for a solution. The king conversed with the dragon.
Could we have a little word?
What?
Look, you've eaten all of our horses, our cattle, and even my favourite sheep. We are running out of food. Could you just, well, go away?
Nope.
What do you want?
Preferably young maidens. Boys taste of snot, maidens taste of flowers and sprinkles.
Look, this isn't really going to be popular.
I'm quite hungry. I could always just burn your castle to the ground. You wouldn't like me when I'm hungry.
It's fine. Just leave it with me.
The king knew that no one was likely to volunteer, so he devised a plan and, with his advisor, addressed his citizens.
We will have a lottery of healthy persons between the ages of 16 and 40. Each name will be collected and a new one chosen each week. Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice we're willing to make. I thank you.
And thus the lottery was formed. Every citizen who met the criteria was forced to place their name forward, and the court would choose the next meal for the dragon. Each time a name was drawn, the maiden was taken to the dragon. This continued for many weeks, the townspeople becoming disheartened. Then one fateful day, the lottery drew the name of the king's daughter. He was beside himself with grief. He implored his people, "For the love of the gods, take gold or silver and all that I have, but let me keep my daughter." Unimpressed, the townsfolk responded, "Sir, you made the law, and our children are now dead, but you would do the contrary. Your daughter shall be given, or else we shall burn you and your house." The king finally relented, but he asked for 8 days' grace, which the townsfolk granted. On the 8th day, he sent his beautiful daughter to the dragon as sacrifice.
I am the daughter of the king, the last fair maid the city could spare.
During the 8 days of respite, the king had been granted. A young knight by the name of George had been trained in mounted and foot combat at a village within the region. He was travelling back when he stumbled across the dragon's lair and a distraught princess.
"Fear not, maiden, for I shall save you. In the name of God." The dragon is down. Fair maiden, take your belt, tie it around the dragon's neck. We'll drag him to the city. There behead him for all to see.
So, triumphant St. George returned to the city, dragging the defeated dragon. He asked the king and the citizens to follow the Christian faith and beheaded the dragon in the city for all to see. The king built a church in honour of the Lady and St. George, with a fountain of water that is said to heal the sick. George warned the king he should be just and kind and share his wealth with the poor of the city. And with that, he took his leave. According to the Golden Legend, George now leaves and travels on to Palestine, where he is ultimately executed and becomes a martyr. In 1348, alongside the creation of the Order of the Garter, Edward II also created the College of St. George in Windsor, dedicating the chapel to the new patron saint. It is said the college holds several relics reputed to be from St. George, including an arm, 2 fingers, his skull, and his heart, gifted by the Emperor Sigismund on the creation as a Garter Knight in 1416. The relics are still housed at St. George's College to this very day.
Potatoes are the
Ha ha ha!